Hello there, how's it going? Great, thanks for asking. So I recently found a nice time save in Leaf Storm 1, right? I don't want to oversell it, but it's an interesting trick that has fascinating implications in terms of how this game is ran, and could very easily change it forever. Though, you could say that about literally every speedrun trick ever developed, right? Being honest with you though, I'd say that this one, for the amount of time it really saves, will actually change how this game is ran more than most, but more on that later. In any case, here's how it goes. So at the beginning of this stage, the game has you ground on a rail here. A pretty conventional strategy is to trick on it twice to build up some meter and then jump off it backwards to land on this ramp over here. Now, through many attempts at finishing this level normally, I've managed to get launched off the rail, but even more quickly than normal due to the game giving you more speed when falling onto this curved part of the rail right here rather than going onto this part of the rail. This tends to give you tons of speed, and this does lead to an important setup, we'll get to it, but most of the time you end up not hitting the ideal jump window, causing you to miss the ramp and fall into this lower part of the level, where you don't want to be. Through plenty of resets and lots of experimentation, I ended up figuring out that you can, in fact, trick off this ramp 3 times rather than only 2, which can set you up perfectly to hit this ramp that you're aiming for. For those who don't know, the max amount of tricks to the rail allows you to have in one combo is 3, until a new combo starts again. Something to note about this is that the third trick of a 3-trick combo on a rail gives you a bit of a burst of speed. In a way, when you jump off the ramp just as you perform the third trick, it gives you a similar, if not the same, speed boosting effect that dropping onto this curved part of the rail seems to give you. After a while, I did manage to get it working fairly consistently, even if it is somewhat uncooperative. After using it for a while, I realized I should probably give it a name, so I decided to settle on the self-explanatory but I'd say effective name of Triple Trick Setup. So here's the deal. The standard rail setup, which I'll call double trick setup, is just way worse than triple trick setup, objectively speaking. Triple trick is much faster, with an ideal one often saving 0.3 to 0.45 seconds over double trick, and it also builds a tiny bit more meter. This might not seem like a lot, but in reality, that tiny chunk of extra meter is actually quite useful to have. Every little bit of meter tends to count in this stage, and it's very easy to just run out at the end.
I ran out of meter, no!
No!
Speaking of meter, something else also worth noting is that another variant of triple trick setup, which I've called the boost triple trick setup, or BTTS, also exists. As the name would imply, it's simply TTS but with a boost thrown in right at the jump. Oddly enough, it doesn't seem to save a significant amount of time in the grand scheme of things. At most, my best BTTS saves about 0.05 seconds over my best regular TTS. In terms of difficulty, I'd say it's about the same. The biggest real difference is that it's a little faster in exchange for expending a tiny bit more meter. Even with this, however, I've finished this stage numerous times with meter to spare. It's certainly not impossible or anything, although like I mentioned, it is very easy to run out, so you should still be careful. Despite me talking about how great TTS is in a run, there is a catch. Well, more than one catch actually. The far more manageable one is that Sonic just goes flying when he uses this. This is to be expected, of course, but with a particularly fast triple trick, he tends to be going so fast that he can land right in front of this spring that he needs to hit, but without boosting, which is something he needs to do to go into the stage's next segment. This, obviously, can be remedied simply by slowing down and ensuring you hit it, although the key is minimizing this amount of time so that you can keep that speed up. This turns this part of the stage into something of a risk-reward type scenario, though to be fair, the difference between slowing down slightly and just barely nailing the boost before the spring isn't colossal or anything, but it is time to save. The other, bigger catch of TTS, and frankly the part that just really sucks, is that it's extremely unreliable. The setup for the jump isn't particularly bad. It's fairly simple to get it all lined up, you just need to have Sonic hit the rail right about here. The hard part is the jump right after the third trick. Depending on what position on the rail you jump, you get a different version of triple trick, and it seems that the only versions of a triple trick launch that you want are only a few frames wide, and I feel it's important to define the effective variance it has, so let's explain all the versions of TTS where you actually land properly. There are some other variants of TTS I've gotten a few times, but they're mostly just kind of bad, since many involve mid-air adjustment, as the angle they give you will make you either overshoot or undershoot the platform you're aiming for. Remember, the reason why you're going so fast is because of the fact that you're holding left after the third trick, and since the readjustment means that you have to quit holding left, which kills all your momentum, means the variants aren't really worth discussing in detail, at least in my mind. The jump variants between TTS and BTTS are mostly similar, so it's not really worth discussing the minor, mostly positioning related differences between the two. So for simplicity's sake, just think of the two variants tricks as being the same. Going from most to least desirable, we've got the one you're aiming for, which I'll just call the ideal TTS. You land right at the ramp, nearly losing no speed due to an almost unnoticeable amount of time you spend sliding. The next variant of TTS is a little less good. It's called Slide TTS because you land on the left end of the platform, and due to the fact that you're still holding left, Sonic slides across the platform before going off the ramp. While it's not quite as good as an ideal TTS, it still saves quite a good chunk of time, usually only losing about 1/10 of a second compared to an ideal TTS. The only other acceptable version of TTS is sadly not that good at all. The only name I could think of for this one is Bad Slide TTS, because that's exactly what it is. With this one, you land in the middle of the platform. It curiously is super slow by comparison to even the less desirable Slide TTS. While it barely saves any time over double trick setup, it does save time, usually. It's not what you want, obviously, but it is acceptable, at least at first. I started resetting over this version of TTS near the end of my grind. Like I stated earlier, most versions of TTS are useless, even disregarding the ones where you completely miss the platform. My point in saying that is that I want to stress that triple trick is very hard and pretty frustrating to use. Right when I found out about TTS, I'd say for each success there were about 8, 9, or even 10 failures. Though near the end, with literal months of practice, it felt more like 3 or 4 failures to each success. In that way, with time it does get easier, but even in theory it's not exactly an easy trick, given how precise the input for an ideal TTS seems to be. So something you might be wondering about is if this game's other character, Blaze, can perform TTS as well. And the answer to that is not really. Though this is due to the fact that Blaze does this air dash when she's in a trick state, unlike Sonic, who does this flying sidekick type move. Due to this, she can't do any of the stage starting strategies that Sonic can, but who cares, because she has something way better than anything Sonic can do because of her air dash. Now, I'm not nearly as familiar with Blaze's equivalency of TTS compared to the actual TTS, and Blaze's equivalent is already pretty well documented. For example, it's used in Speedbreaker 55's Leafstorm 1 Blaze World Record, link in the description. And to get nerdy about the technical details of this trick, actually, it isn't really TTS, it's something that's functionally similar but mechanically different, so it's not really worth getting super into in this video, but I'll give you a simplified version of how it works. Blaze can use her air dash to get onto the rail, which seems to maintain all of her air dash's initial speed when she lands on it. From here, she has a tiny window to jump off the rail and get launched off in an ideal way, though she's going so fast that when she does it, she can completely skip the ramp and go right to the spring. Though, as a side note, something I find particularly funny about this trick is that sometimes Blaze can be moving so incredibly fast that she can go right through the spring. In summary though, it's a lot like TTS, but harder and way more efficient. And also Blaze only. Now, this next trick actually threw a wrench into things. For nearly the entire production of this video, I was under the assumption that TTS was the absolute fastest way to start off this stage that humans could go for, when in reality, near the end of making this, I discovered something even faster. You remember how I mentioned that when you drop onto this curved part of the rail you get a bunch of speed? Well, the thing about it is that this speed can actually be taken advantage of, contrary to what I thought at first. Similar to TTS, this strategy, which from now on I'll refer to as Decline Start Strat, or DSS, simply involves jumping off the rail backwards at a correct time. But this time it doesn't involve the speed boost that a TTS provides you inherently, it instead relies on the formerly mentioned burst of speed that dropping onto the rail seems to give you. In fact, the amount of speed it gives you seems to be faster than any TTS can provide you, to the extent that a super fast one can give you a mythical sub 820 landing. Of course, as you probably have guessed by now, decline start strat is incredibly hard, simply because the area of the rail that you're aiming to land on is very specific, and this combined with a jump input that's comparable to the precision of TTS just gives you another thing to worry about with this setup. Due to this, despite the speed it grants you, I really don't use DSS all too much, just because of how much you fail it combined with how few frames it actually saves you. You don't exactly need an absolutely perfect start to this stage. The IL for Leaf Storm 1 isn't nearly optimized enough for not doing this to matter too much, at least not yet. Besides, TTS isn't really that far behind it, all things considered. But like I mentioned, yes, in theory, DSS is the fastest way to start this stage. Sorry, but that's just how it is. In a way, TTS and its many variants are like my own personal Frankenstein's monster, because I hate what I've created and I live in fear of it. You might be thinking that's a little dramatic, it's just a video game after all, but the reason I say that is solely down to the fact that this isn't a trick that you perform like half an hour into a run, which if it were the case would make it pretty unviable and not really worth going for unless your run was in dire straits and you felt like risking it all. That's not the case, however. Instead, it's right at the very beginning of the game, and the thing that scares me is that in theory, the meta of a full game run is to fish for a triple trick, requiring a reset for every unsuccessful one. Now, me personally, I don't think this game is going to get pushed to that level anytime soon, but it is something to think about. So that would be all I have to say about this trick. But I actually do have a little more to say about it, since by pure happenstance, Sonic Rush's sequel, Sonic Rush Adventure, just so happens to have a hidden island on it with a nearly identical layout to Leaf Storm 1's. So of course, the next logical question is to ask if triple trick setup is possible in Sonic Rush Adventure as well. Well, no. Triple trick setup doesn't work in this game due to the third trick not giving you a burst of speed like it did in the original Rush. You can still jump over from the top all the way to the ramp, but it isn't quite as useful as it was in the original. Likewise, the drop onto the decline of the rail doesn't give you a burst of speed anymore, so DSS doesn't function either. Blaze can kinda do the trick she was able to do before, but it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. Yeah, kinda disappointed me too. Sorry to end this on a low note. So as for right now, that's all I have to say about triple trick. I apologize for it. In any case, I hope you found this video informative, or at the very least interesting. Have a good one.